that these women they were just fallen women and they were to be punished, and that even the poor little illegitimate children were called the spawn of the devil, which is absolutely terrible.
In the twilight, children lay sleeping.
All I kept saying over and over and over again in my head was, what was it for, Ma'am? What the hell was it for? You're gone, and I haven't got my son.
The darkness gets darker without a full moon.
I was so ashamed of being born out of wedlock for starters. It was all to do with shame, and then my mother was ashamed, and her family would have been ashamed because I came on the scene. So everything to do with my life was shame.
So sing a new song.
John Rogers is one of these children of shame, a child born in sin, guilty of having been born outside the sacred bond of matrimony. He is one of the tens of thousands of ill-fated children born in ultra-Catholic 20th century Ireland. Hidden, interned, cast away by society.
I'm a child of shame because of somebody taking advantage of her. She paid for that sin or that crime or whatever you want to call it for the best part of her life. In fact, her whole life was spent paying the price for having given birth to me. And that's something that I have to deal with, that I have to absorb, and it hasn't been easy over the years.
John was torn from the arms of his mother, Bridie, when he was just 1 year old. Fate ultimately brought them back together, and since her death in 2001, he has constantly sought to retrace the course of their respective lives.
And I remember asking my mother many, many years later, I said, what was it like when you were growing up? And I never forgot the answer. She said, John, I didn't have a childhood, and now I think I know why.
John was born in a home for single mothers in Tuam, a town that hit the headlines in the spring of 2014. A hell on earth where hundreds of children are said to have died from ill treatment. Bastards, fatherless babes whose very existence was denied until and beyond their deaths. Shamefully buried in secret and then forgotten. The Tuam mother and baby home no longer exists, but resembled this abandoned building in Connemara. It was there that his mother grew up. It is here that he can confront the demons of his past.
I didn't believe it. But seeing is believing. Little children, when they came here like my mother, if you didn't wash yourself at the wash basin where your name was, you got leathered. You got beaten. How stupid is that? I just can't believe it. It's like turning the clock back. It's like being a little infant now running around here, but I'm running around in Tuam. And this is what it was like. I'm just one of those lucky children to have survived that.
Tuam, a tranquil town in Western Ireland. Tuam, a name that has traumatised the whole country since an unimaginable story was first revealed. The existence of a mass grave, where the remains of some 800 children are said to be buried beneath the grass on the edge of a playing field. There are no images of the bodies, as there has been no investigation and no exhumations. The bodies were hidden on the grounds of the Tuam Mother and Baby Home, one of the prison-like maternity units run by nuns, where pregnant single mothers were locked up before having their babies taken from them definitively.
In the consciousness of the town, everybody knew that the home had existed, and without thinking very much about it, nobody was particularly surprised that there would have been babies buried there. It wasn't something that that was part of our consciousness.
The locals at first believed only a handful of stillborn babies were involved. One neighbour had a small memorial built in their honour, but without knowing the numbers or the identities of the deceased.
There is a tendency in Ireland not to talk about things in public. The likelihood is that there was a lot of discussion in families, and I suppose sometimes it takes a light shone from outside to bring it to the surface again.
This light from outside came via the national press, who bestowed a whole other dimension on the affair. They spoke of 800 deaths, children aged between 1 and 9 who died from malnutrition or the lack of treatment, hurriedly buried with no religious service because they were illegitimate, thrown into a mass grave like unwanted trash to be disposed of in secret. A new scandal for the Irish clergy, already reeling from 15 years of revelations involving paedophile priests and the internment of women in convents.
There's been numerous church scandals, and I think this was the last major, well, I hope the last major scandal from the church. The whole story had exploded. We were talking about, you know, an 800 baby mass grave over in Tuam, but there was no identity for any of these children. And we just felt that it was very important now to give them a name, to give them some recognition. And, you know, they went from being children in the ground to angels and to people, and they deserve some sort of dignity.
On May 25, 2014, Alison O'Reilly dropped a bombshell with an article in the Irish Mail on Sunday, publishing a list of the babies allegedly thrown into the mass grave by the Bonsecourt nuns who ran the Tuam Mother and Babies Home. 795 names, a macabre list that horrified the Irish nation, and beyond too. The scandal immediately became international, and yet nothing was done. Neither the local authorities nor the police decided to dig up the bodies and confront the shameful truth of events a whole society had apparently been happy to consign to oblivion.
Encontrado en las inmediaciones de un antiguo hogar de acogida católico. En esa fosa han encontrado los cadáveres de unos 800 bebés y en el centro...
It really is a disgusting story, heartbreaking, more painful than anything that something like this went on in Ireland. I feel that no matter what, we have to bring it out into the open. We have to deal with it for the mothers, for the families, but most of all for those children who have died in such horrific circumstances. So yeah, it's not far off a Holocaust.
A Holocaust? The word both shocks and raises questions. What exactly happened at Tuam that so chilled the hearts of a whole country? To understand the origins of the affair, we have to talk to Catherine Corless. It was due to the determination of this farmer's daughter and amateur historian and genealogist that the story behind one of Ireland's most sordid secrets first broke. Like many inhabitants of Tuam, Catherine remembers the old grey fortress-like building, the Mother and Babies Home, destroyed in the 1970s, a model of which she built herself and which now stands in her kitchen.
I remember these little children coming in later than we did. They were put at the back of the classroom, and the nuns didn't really involve themselves with them. They were treated differently. For the mothers that went in there, I found out that mothers who went in there were sent in by their families. First of all, it goes back to the church. They were condemned from the altar by priests. It was almost a criminal offence to get pregnant, to put them into this home behind those 8-foot-high walls that surrounded the Mother and Baby Home. First of all, when I started out, it was mainly to be just a history of the home and the Mother and Baby Home and the children and the mothers, and to try and find a little bit out about them. But while I was talking to people in the area, I started asking them questions. And just by the way, someone said to me, "You do know there's a little graveyard there in the corner." Now, I had never heard of that.
Catherine Corless at first thought about the town cemetery on the other side of the road, but certain older locals she talked to mentioned graves on the home's own grounds. At the Galway Registry Office, she finally obtained a list of the children who had died at the home. Exactly 795 deaths, between 1925 and the home's closure in 1961. She compared the list with the Tuam cemetery archives. She was stunned.
There's no record at all whatsoever of these children, where they are buried. I then cross-checked the local cemeteries around the area. Every townland has its own cemetery, and neither are they in those books. So we have 795 children who died. We have their death certs. We have no burial records for them.
A staggering number, which casts a black cloud over the dozens of mother and baby homes that operated throughout Ireland. Tens of thousands of children were born in such places before being taken from their mother's arms. A deeply troubling story which began in the middle of the 19th century.
Originally, the workhouse were actually very much about offering minimum assistance to people who were financially vulnerable. But unmarried mothers obviously gravitated there. And it's only when you see the rise of the Catholic Church in the 1850s and 1860s, when it becomes a really powerful institution in Ireland, that there's this push to code these places morally. And the Catholic Church is very much at the forefront of saying, if unmarried mothers are being accommodated in the workhouses, then they need to be separated from all the other people because they are morally contagious. She is the one that has to be hidden now because her existence belies the idea of Ireland as morally pure.
When Ireland became independent in 1922, the Catholic faith became Ireland's standard bearer and the embodiment of national identity. Virginity was idealised and pregnancy out of wedlock seriously stigmatised. Women who transgressed were taken in considerable numbers to the notorious Magdalen laundries, where they were sentenced to hard, free labour under the strict authority of nuns in order to expiate their sins.
And there was a huge emphasis on building a secure nation distinct from Britain. We were a very poor country, and there was an enormous kind of emphasis on our moral purity. We may be poor, but we were more pure than dirty Britain. And so this kind of idea of a purity of our nation and the purity of the character of the people became a very kind of excited idea. And of course, all of this purity was fought out on the bodies of girls and women.
Such beliefs were widely shared by the religious orders which regimented Irish society. The Sisters of the Good Shepherd, the Bon Secours Sisters, the Sisters of the Sacred Hearts of Jesus and Mary, of Our Lady of Charity. The state entrusted the Church with implementing the young nation's social policy, and it imposed a moral straitjacket, often with the active complicity of Irish citizens.
If you look at the way in which contemporaries talked about unmarried mothers, they used legal terminology. So they referred to first-time offenders and repeat offenders. That was referring to the first pregnancy and any subsequent pregnancy. So that's legal terminology for something that is not a legal crime. And that's the extraordinary thing, is that this system perpetuated right up until the 1980s, where people were working for nothing in these institutions, and that was accepted by everybody involved, including the families of these women, where they never questioned that system. And I think it's because for some people, the church was the law.
Tuam and its mass grave may ultimately be only one of the cogs in an iniquitous system which persisted throughout the 20th century. The story is incomprehensible unless one studies the origins of the Irish Republic, a political regime where the church was nominally separate from the state.
Our written constitution, the accepted wisdom of the written constitution is that it was largely drafted under the beady eyes of the late Eamon de Valera, perhaps the most prominent Irish politician of the 20th century. But the Archbishop of Dublin scrutinised every word of the Irish Constitution before it was put to the people in a referendum. His name was John Charles McQuaid. He is a remarkable figure. He died, I think, in 1972. He had been Archbishop for the greater part of 40 years. And in that time, he was probably the most dominant figure in Ireland.
And so church and state worked hand in glove to establish an implacable organisation. a system of internment and mandatory labour for all pregnant unmarried women. Like Bridie, John's mother, who experienced all manner of institutions. A juvenile detention centre, the Tuam mother and baby home, and after a baby was taken, reclusion once more. For 15 years, she was incarcerated in a Magdalen laundry, from which she escaped at the age of 34. A lifetime of servitude and grieving, of endless thoughts for her son John, to whom she wrote every month in vain.
And it's painful to admit it, but I was running away from her, you know, because I was ashamed of her. It was a terrible stigma. It was a horrendous thing. It was horrendous going to school because I was always called a bastard child. I was told so many times that nobody wanted me.
The bastard child John sees himself as a survivor. He did not die in the Tuam home. He stayed there until he was 5.5, much longer than the average inmate.
And of course, the big high walls, the walls, like the prison type walls, that was completely surrounding the ground. The hundreds of children that was there, it seemed like to me like there was a couple of hundred children there, all different ages. And those toilets, those open air toilets over against the big high wall, I mean, they were just literally opened, a line of toilet bowls. So that's my memory of John.
Above all, John remembers the children who disappeared from the home in Tuam after a few weeks or months, only rarely after several years, adopted like himself into a foster family.
It was a supermarket where people from all over the country, particularly County Galway, all around Tuam, they went in and they picked out a child, and the nun had brought them on a tour of the grounds, and 2 or 3 children might have been chosen and said, well, which of those are we going to go for? I think maybe we'll go for the little fella there. He's 5 or 6. No, I think I'd like somebody a bit older or a bit younger.
Dear Mr. and Mrs. Brennan, we had a very nice letter from your priest, and we are pleased that you persevered in your application. So I think we will be able to give you a baby. Kindly let me know by return post, if possible, what age baby you would be interested in. At the moment, we have 2 lovely boys. Don't delay in writing, as we have a very great demand for children at the moment. God and Mary be with you.
It was no doubt with a letter of this kind that John's fate was sealed, handed over to a new family by the Bon Secours sisters. The O'Briens provided a home in exchange for a modest state allowance. The system was somewhat less benevolent with regard to the mothers who were forced to abandon their children.
My mother was forced to stay for 1 year and a month, yes. And then when she left that particular morning, she had nothing with her. She had nothing that she could bring. There was no point in bringing a little jumper or a little glove or a little sock or a shoe or anything like that. So what she did was she cut off a lock of my hair as a keepsake. And to her, that was a symbol that she would never be parted from her son. And she vowed that she'd keep that, and she did it. And she kept it for 30 odd years until we were reunited. And then she handed it back to me in this house. Lock of hair, 1948. It's hard to believe it has survived all this time.
John started writing when he was in his 60s. He devoted his first book to his mother's life story. A form of catharsis for John, a lesson in perseverance and hope, via the story of a woman who never admitted defeat after being made to give up her son. As a survivor of Tuam, he is today in shock. He could have died there, like the 795 others. But what did they die of? John would like to know. There is a woman who would like to know too. She wishes to remain anonymous, so we shall call her Helen, a collateral victim of the infernal machine. On the death of her mother 2 years ago, she learnt that she had 2 half-brothers, One of them was among the 795 who died at Tuam. The other may have been adopted or is also dead.
You know, it's to find you have two brothers, then to find the conditions they were treated under, then to find that this had happened and how he died, and then to find that there's one missing. I mean, it's an absolute mire. I'm in shock at the moment. Emotionally, I think I'm dead at the moment. I'm waiting for the explosion. I'm an only child. I have no siblings. It's been quite traumatic to realise that my whole life kind of was based on a lie through my mother's making. Shame, guilt, forced into living a lie.
Helen has found the admission form for her mother at the Tuam home. There is no doubt.
To the matron or other officer in charge of the children's home, Tuam, I hereby certify that to the best of my belief, Bridget Dolan, aged 28 years, is a person in the county eligible for relief who is an expectant, unmarried mother. 26 March, 1950.
Helen looked further. In the home's registry, she discovered proof of the ill treatment the babies were victims of, despite the allowance paid by the state for each child living there.
Came across the report, and to see that he was listed in this report, it was a report on the home and the conditions in the home, that he was emaciated with a voracious appetite. Two words you don't juxtapose to each other. Emaciated means you're starved. Voracious appetite means you're starving, somebody's not feeding you. 13 months old.
Helen asked the Bonsecourt sisters for more information and received a letter from Sister Mary Ryan, who runs the Order's Irish branch. A letter in which it is clearly admitted that the remains of Helen's brother were probably buried in the small makeshift cemetery on the old home's own grounds.
I have requested through my solicitor on foot of the report I made to the Gardaí that I believe there was criminality involved. The Attorney General to open this grave and to identify exactly where my brother is in relation to that. And I also want him disinterred and reinterred with his mother in a proper graveyard, a proper consecrated graveyard, and give her some peace and him some peace. At least if they weren't united in life, be united in death.
But the official authorities still refuse to exhume the bodies. For them, there is no question of unearthing a secret that so many have tried to stifle for decades. Perhaps because this would involve facing a barrage of questions concerning the whole mother and baby home operation. But in the name of who, in the name of what, could such atrocities have been committed? Why was the mortality rate so horrific?
More than likely, they died of infectious disease called gastroenteritis. It was a highly infectious disease that killed most babies in Ireland before the 1940s. And one way of preventing gastroenteritis was breastfeeding. And of course, if these mothers were being separated from their babies, then what were their chances of breastfeeding? That the death rate was 5 and 6 times higher than babies born within marriage. The state's response was, this is shocking, this is terrible, but it doesn't fall within our remit.
These babies were illegitimate. They were quite literally illegal. And unless there were families who were willing to adopt them, and unless the nuns could make in some ways some kind of either financial or political social capital in being the people who provided these babies for adoption, there was very little interest in them. They were a problem.
All the blooms that we did grow were shed in depths of winter snow.
Derek was one of those unwanted problem children. His childhood was nothing but humiliation and mistreatment. He was born in a mother and baby home in Dublin, this time run by the Protestant church. But the administration was equally uncharitable for bastards.
I was affected in ways that I didn't even know that could have stemmed to being a Bethany home if you weren't aware of those factors. Where my wife will confirm that I was always OTT when it came to dealing with children's nappies. I couldn't, if a young child or a nappy stage child was crying, I would always have to say, Carol, change its nappy. It wants its nappy changed. And finding out years later through our research that children were left with virtually with nappies unrotting before there was change.
Derek's childhood reveals the insidious and Machiavellian aspect of the history of the children of shame. He symbolises the almost industrial and illegal nature of the adoption trade in Ireland at the time. Snubbing every law, and with tacit government complicity, religious orders became improvised adoption agencies, literally selling children. The business provided significant income, be it impossible to calculate. The secret is well guarded by the church.
I was born Derek Leinster. Leinster. I then became Derek Trainer. I then became Derek Carway. And I then became Derek Leinster.
Even Derek is lost. It's not easy to construct a new identity when you're constantly switched from one family to the next, changing name each time. His adoptive parents, lured by the allowances paid by the state and others, saw him as little more than a malleable source of free labour. "17 years ago, Derek found the man he calls his brother, the son of his first adoptive parents. Tom was 9 years old when Derek was placed in his family in the early 40s.
Well, one of the only living people on earth that would have remembered me when I was 7.5 months old.
Ah, yeah, sure, I nursed you.
You remember the state that I was in when I arrived?
I had to get anti-physician to do your hair because there's a lot of scabs. You remember that?
Yeah, well I don't, but you told me, I remember you saying about I got blood, pus and scabs on my head.
Yeah, and the hands used to be full of blood between you and Sam. I used to have to take off the scab off your heads. Took about nearly a year to do it.
Derek's photo album is a mosaic of a chaotic existence. He revisits the main events with Tom. The Dublin home with its glacial dormitories. The matrons who would make life more than tough. And the various families where he sometimes settled, for a while.
The only mother that you had in all your mothers was myself.
Absolutely, and what a special age.
That's it, yeah. I was your mother, all the time.
So when you think that that's an age when a child needs its mother.
That's right, well, I was your mother.
There you go.
And someone had to do it, right? Because Mammy used to be busy on the farm and all, and with the other children and all, someone had to look after you and...
Sure, you're only carrying out your job. You were told to do it, weren't you?
Doing my job.
Get on with it.
A child without a real family, Derek finally found happiness thanks to Carol, his wife for 50 years and mother of their 4 children. But today, seeing Tom again, the conversation inevitably returns to the burning issue of the day, the ghosts of Tuam.
You see, there's a whole lot of babies now that they're going to dig up. There's 700 and something, you know that?
Oh yes, yes,
in some of these convents.
Galway, yeah, down Galway
or something, yeah.
Yeah.
It's sad.
It is, but
that was the way it was.
In Tuam, Catherine Corless has continued her investigation. She now knows the identities and the number of missing children, but the bodies have not been found. She wants to know where the 795 children of shame are buried.
Climb to heaven on a silver ladder.
She has found a key witness.
Walk the earth and
He takes us to the crime
go
scene. Franny Hopkins is 50.
angel who
He's been a United Nations Blue Beret in Lebanon and Sudan and has seen the horrors of war.
God to choose.
But the memory of what he saw as a child one afternoon in 1975 has never faded.
This used to be our general play area, and in the early 70s it was like a derelict building, building site. They were in the process of building this housing estate. And one day my friend and I, Barry, we were in here, and over that wall there used to be an orchard, and we were in getting apples. And coming out of the orchard, we jumped from the wall and landed on the ground here. And when we landed on the ground, we felt a hollow. When we brushed back the overgrown weeds from it, we discovered that it was a slab of concrete. So we prized open the slab of concrete, and we discovered to our horror a jumble of bones, massive bones. And even then we could tell that there were that of children and possibly babies. It was like a crypt, a tomb, and it was as if they were just stacked there, and there was bits of rags, and you know, that basically is just bones and dirt and rags. And as I said, you know, we were surprised and probably a bit shocked.
Further vital testimony supports the retired soldier's account. That same year, 1975, the home was razed to the ground by bulldozers. But before the site was covered over with a playing field and a small housing estate, someone saw something.
A neighbour came into my house one day and she said that one of the young boys out the back had a stick with a skull in it. So I examined it and I asked him, where did he get it? And he said there was more in a hole up there pointing up to the right. When I went over there with the other two women and we were looking to see what we could see, and I kind of want to look in, kind of to see what it was, but the ground wouldn't come into my feet. It was very wet. It was after heavy rain. And I ended up down in the hole. And the women grabbed me by the shoulders here to hold me. And I said, wait, wait. I remember saying that. About maybe, could be 6 or 8 feet in front of me, I noticed something. And it was forever like a stairs going away from me. Like the steps were going like that. That's what my thinking of it was. Because there was all little bundles laid on each step, and they were rolled up like a litre bottle, and that you'd rolled it up in something. And it was like cloth that had gone black or grey. And I knew it was something rolled in that, and they were all over the place in there. And I said, pull me out now. And I was pretty shook up and mucky.
Mary returned sometime later, accompanied by a local woman who had worked at the home several years previously.
She kind of bent over like that and had a look into the hole. And, oh yes, she said, they're all in there now, them little babies. I often brought one out there. And she said, there's a tunnel going back in there over to the hospital. And she pointed over her left shoulder. Over there, she said, that's where the babies were born. And I would have many times brought one down there and left them there, little infants.
Mary cast this lugubrious image from her mind until she herself gave birth 18 months later in a maternity unit run by Bon Secours sisters.
My baby was brought in, and when I went to lift it out of the little cot, I kind of got an awful fright because it was rolled up very tightly in cloth and it was just his face out. And I stripped everything off the child, pulled all this stuff off, it was all tied up. It kept bothering me because that's when I realised that that's how they put the babies up there. And then other people told me that's what they used to keep their babies in when they were in there. The nuns used to do that.
An aerial view from the 1970s presents a clear view of the area's topography. We can see houses being built on the site of the old home. There's an area with piles of rubble and a stand of trees along the perimeter. It was here that Mary fell and saw the bundled up babies. And here that the 795 children may have lain piled up and buried for so many years. The key testimony of Franny Hopkins and Mary Moriarty has guided Catherine Corless in her research. After studying plans of the home from various times in the 20th century, she is convinced that the nuns used a disused cesspool to bury the children.
Those drawings in particular are from the Tuam workhouse, and it indicates exactly where all the cesspools are. We have what the underground cesspools may look like.
To fully understand this, we need to imagine the place as it was 50 years ago. A network of tunnels spread out from the home towards former cesspit systems on the outer edges of the property. It was no doubt in this maze that the bodies of the children were transported and buried.
Now these cesspits and tunnels we're talking about, they're 7 foot high. They could be walked through, they were 4 foot wide. They would have been done in red brick, so they would resemble a burial chamber. So again, I have marked out all these cesspools in red here, so we know exactly where today, where the children, where I figure they may be buried, where the cesspools are. We need to know that.
Secret child.
The suspicions seemed well-founded, but the Tuam affair still needed scientific support. It came through Tony Maguire, an expert on clandestine graves, who had made a reputation with the discovery of a concealed mass grave in Belfast in 2010. She dealt with exhuming around 100 bodies there.
Secret child does not breathe.
The Tuam case reflects what I've already been doing for a number of years in the north of Ireland. We have been working for a long time now to give recognition to these areas of marginalised infant burial. Within Irish culture, they're called Kini. Now, Kini is any area of unblessed or unhallowed ground, which is used for the burial of particular individuals, including children, especially children who die before baptism.
As soon as the Tuam scandal was revealed, Tony went to the scene. But she wasn't dealing with typical Kini here, with merely a few isolated, secluded graves. This involved almost 800 children. Tony Maguire scanned the area believed to contain the bodies. Initial results corroborated the clues and visual testimony, indicating that the babies were buried here, right beneath her feet.
But actually, it adds great weight to the evidence that we've already collected. Allow me to show you. If you imagine the back of this section is where we're standing now. There's one single anomaly that runs right along.
The anomaly Tony mentions concerns these small red spots which appear on the scan in the tunnel and cesspit area where Franny and Mary saw the bones and the bodies. Scientific analysis has therefore confirmed that something has been buried there. Tony knows from experience that it will require only quite basic excavation work to uncover bodies or small coffins.
If you had all the green taken off here and you let the surface of the ground dry out and you could see the footprint of each grave that would potentially be here, then you would very quickly and very easily see a grouping of small little individual graves. You would know that that section of burial is definitely children.
You know, our parents told us not to come back down here again, that we shouldn't be here, and that it wasn't right. And you know, the priest was coming, and the priest would bless the site, and you know that whoever was buried there, be it children or adults or whoever, that they let rest in peace. So, as I said, we came back a few days later, and the place was completely overhauled. It was levelled, and you know, more or less kind of backfilled, I suppose the word you used to describe it like.
In 1975, a few shovelfuls of earth rapidly covered over Franny's sinister discovery. But an official document released several years later reveals that the secret was not so secret after all. It's a local council permit for construction on the site, and the document clearly identifies the area as the old children's burial ground.
This is my church. We expect our priests and our nuns to be just as accountable as anyone else in a position of power. And we will get it. It will happen, because I will not stop until it does.
Many questions have risen as the shockwaves stirred up by the Tuam home revelations have spread. For example, was the prevailing moral outrage against unmarried mothers so overwhelming that they abandoned all hope, as well as their babies? Did they docilely accept to hand over their babies to the nuns so they could be adopted? Terry lives in a suburb of Dublin. Her testimony and her anger forcefully contradict the notion that the mothers meekly submitted to the forces of authoritative morality. Terry became pregnant in 1972 at the age of 18. She fled from Ireland and her parents to take refuge with her aunt in England. But after only a few weeks, she realised she would have to move again.
When I went back to my aunt's, all my clothes was in my aunt's, everything belonged to me. Members of the clergy were in the kitchen, and I was informed then that I was going back to Ireland, but never said where, or just that I was going to an airport.
On March 20th, 1973, Terry was taken by force back to Ireland and interned in the Bessborough Mother and Baby Home near Cork.
They put me in the car in Cork airport, and I was driven then to a very isolated place with all trees, and it just seemed in the middle of nowhere. I could see this massive, massive building with steps up to it and a big, huge door. And I was just, you know, in shock. Like, where was I? What was this place?
It was no more nor less than a kidnapping, orchestrated by the Crusade of Rescue, an Irish Catholic organisation which, with the blessing of local authorities, tracked down and brought back fallen women to their native soil, generally acting on a denunciation. This document indicates that Terry's kidnapping resulted from her aunt's betrayal, and she has no doubt her own mother was in on it.
I've never had any evidence, but deep down I've always known it. My mother wanted to save face, and her fear of my father was far outweighed her need or her want or her love for her grandson, because he wasn't real. He was never real to her. He was never real to anybody in my family. When they put me behind that wall in Bessborough, even to this day, to this very day, 41 years later, not one single person in my family has ever asked me what was it like.
Terry eventually escaped from Bessborough, but was once more denounced by her mother, caught by the sisters, and interned in another home, this time in Dublin. She gave birth to a baby boy. 6 days later, the nuns forced her to sign adoption papers, and she was forever deprived of her son, Niall. 35,000 children met the same fate in the 20th century, sold to Irish or American families. A profitable business for the religious orders. And an Irish specialty, we could say, honoured by a Hollywood star like Jane Russell, who came to the island to buy a family.
My son and I, our lives were stolen. And you never, ever get that back. Ever. Where did they think all these beautiful babies were coming from? Oh, they gave them away, they gave them away. Why would any girl in her right mind give her baby away?
You were probably, aren't you? Your poor little bit, aren't you? You weren't. No. This little girl.
The practice was even openly endorsed by the religious orders, as this film shot in 1968 reveals. The report features Sister Paul, the same nun who a few years later would organise the adoption of Terry's baby.
We take in the background of the parents and what they really are looking for in a child.
But in fact, most of the children that are adopted here would be illegitimate children, wouldn't they?
They're all illegitimate. Because with most adopting parents, if you brought them into a nursery, show them 3 or 4 babies, well, They might want to take the whole lot of them, and they choose one baby, but they'll be so sorry for the ones they left behind.
Do you want to take her home?
Put the wrap around her arm.
I would prosecute the Irish state and hold them accountable for the reason being, without them, this private religious group would have had no power whatsoever. Let Sister Paul, let John O'Mahony, Frank O'Holohan, Sister Patricia, Sister Elizabeth, let them all stand in the room beside me and tell me who gave them the right to take my child.
Despite the litany of scandals that has affected the clergy over the past 15 years, Ireland is still disinclined to face up to its past. In an attempt to shed light on the Tuam affair, the government has announced an official investigation, but for the moment no action has been taken. Divorce has been legal for just 20 years, and abortion is still forbidden. The social and political shackles of Irish society are still very much in place.
The Catholic Church in Ireland has a huge influence on the hearts and minds of people in Ireland still. I think primarily because they're still in control of the national school system to a large part. Over 90% of the schools are Catholic run, even though they're state funded at a primary level. And then well over 60% of the second level schools are still run according to a strong religious ethos.
There has never been a political will in this country to address these awful circumstances by which people were treated so badly. I believe that some of the most prominent members of the Irish clergy, to the very highest levels of the Irish Catholic clergy, and I mean the very highest, I mean you can go no higher, that they are among the people who protected for many years, decades, some of the worst abusers of children. And they did so knowingly. And I believe that even today, some of them, now retired from their high office, but living, should be pursued at the very least for the criminal conspiracy to protect abusers of children.
Thousands of paedophile crimes, a government inquiry commission, more than 800 guilty, indisputable evidence. And yet, there has not been a single trial, not one conviction. Such a flagrant denial of justice demonstrates the absolute impunity the Church enjoys even today. Victims of sexual abuse, women locked in laundry convents, bastard children. In a country where 1 child in every 4 is born out of wedlock, is it not time for justice to be done?
I think the state feels a debt of honour, so I think that's the reluctance. It would be kind of literally eating itself to attack the church, and it's just not going to do it.
Now, if you ask me about Irish justice, I would also say to you, Irish justice, I think that would also be a good idea.
Despite repeated requests, no member of government, no magistrate, no religious order has agreed to talk about the Tuam affair. We've received just one unequivocal letter sent by the Bon Secours Sisters Communications Service.
When the Oh My God mass grave in west of Ireland broke in an English-owned paper, it surprised the hell out of everybody, not least the Sisters of Bon Secours in Ireland. If you come here, you'll find no mass grave, no evidence that children were ever so buried, and a local police force saying, yeah, a few bones were found, but this was an area where famine victims were buried. So? Several international TV stations have aborted their plans to make documentaries because essentially all that can be said is Ireland was a moralistic, inward-looking, anti-feminist country of exaggerated religiosity, which most of us knew already.
The story of Tuam, as yet, has no epilogue. It is bogged down for the moment in a distant corner of the county of Mayo in the far west of Ireland. It began with a project for a memorial for 795 human beings, 795 children who lie beneath a patch of ground in the town of Tuam. It has now been completed, engraved thanks to money gathered by Catherine Corless from various charitable souls. Even the Sisters of Bon Secours have made a contribution. The sculptor can now reveal his work to Catherine, accompanied by Helen, the half-sister of Desmond, whose name is written on the bronze plaque.
It's a bit ironic, actually, but this to me now is closure. I brought flowers. I didn't know whether I should leave them at the grave. Is the grave the grave? Here it's actually something concrete. I can see his name.
Yes, the ironic thing is that Helen has nowhere else, apart from this anonymous warehouse, to pay her respects. As long as a theoretical investigative commission has not submitted its report, no tombstone can be erected on the site of the former mother and baby home in Tuam. Will the unwanted problem children who lived here one day be entitled to a worthy resting place?
People don't like facing into things like this. They want to leave it in the past. But we can't do that. We have to remember those children with dignity. We have to keep pressure on the inquiry group that's coming up, and we hope they may announce it before this year is out.
The investigation has to be done, established, sorted out what's happening, proper dedication given to the site, and then the plaques can be put up, and then people can come, and then people can grieve.
Grieve the children who died in oblivion. Mourn the generations of mothers whose lives were destroyed in the name of a purity-obsessed morality claiming to serve righteous and rightful men, the true masters of this story, and yet the most noticeably absent.
There's no shame in being born. There's no shame in not being married. This was imposed by a regime, a Catholic regime. But I mean, what about all the men? Like, I don't see any homes for unmarried fathers.
Secret child, hidden in the cradle beneath the sheets. The secret child, born of flesh and blood in the stillness of night. Secret child does not breathe inside a mother's womb. Outside where springtime bluebells bloom, the secret child, secret child, labeled bastard is a paper child, the secret child.